Have you ever wondered what it's like to be in charge of a nonprofit organization, like an established one? Have you ever wondered what it was like to look after sea turtles or other marine animals, but also look at conservation? Well, you're going to find out today. Today, I am talking to Andy Dehart of the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. He is the president and CEO, and he is a friend of mine that I actually used to live quite close to here in Burlington, Ontario, when he was the VP of Husbandry at the Ripley's Aquarium when it opened. And in this interview, we're going to talk a lot about his career, how he got to where he is right now as president and CEO of the Loggerhead Marine Life Center, what it's all about, but also his journey and how he kind of got to the different positions. I think this is going to be really interesting for those of you who want to be involved in marine conservation at different levels. So let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is a podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And today I am speaking to Andy Dehart, who is the president and CEO of the Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Florida. And, you know, one of the great things about talking to somebody that you know, I think it's always great to be able to discover their career, how they got to where they are. That's one of the best things to be able to do that, because you will see through this interview, not everybody's path to like where they ended up really is a straight arrow. You know, it's like a straight path. That's where you go. And I think that is a big myth within the marine science field, and what we're discovering more and more as we speak to different people in the marine science field. We just noticed that it's a meandering path, and it's always interesting to talk to people, just different people from different parts of the world, from different walks of life, and how they ended up where they are, to give you that more of that confidence to take some risks. And you're going to hear how Andy decided to take some risks and change his path a couple of times to be able to get to where he is, including like this path where, you know, president and CEO of a Marine Life Center is a bit of a different path from what he was on before. And, you know, he takes these risks, they end up working out. He works hard to do that. And I just think it's a great testament to, you know, changing and pivoting when you need to in order to be able to do what you want. You're going to notice something in this interview, that conservation has always been Andy's, you know, always been his path. That's always been his passion. And the choices he's made throughout, you know, his career so far, and he's a young guy, you know, and he'll continue to do, is that conservation path. That's what he's always been about. And you're going to see that in this interview. And I want you to notice that. I want you to also look at, for you, what's important to you. What's your passion? What do you want to let people know, or what do you want to accomplish in your career, and let that guide you to the different choices you make. And it may not be the ones you expect to make, like at the beginning of your career and in the middle of your career. So here is the interview with Andy Dehart, president and CEO of the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. Enjoy, and I will talk to you after. Hey, Andy, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about the Loggerhead Marine Life Center?
I certainly am, Andrew. Can't wait to talk to you.
Right on. This is a bit of a reunion of sorts. This is an interview I've been waiting to do for a long time. Andy and I have lived in the same town, two marine biologists in the same town here in Burlington, Ontario, when you worked for Ripley's, believe it or not, aquarium here in Toronto, in the city close by. And we definitely got along. We had a lot in common. Marine biology of what is one of them. We both love the 49ers. That's another one. And so we got along really well. And then you moved away and you went on, and now you are with the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. And we're going to talk all about that, your travels, your journey through the marine biology career as it stands now. We're going to talk about the Marine Life Center because it's been a long time since I've had somebody on the podcast, one, to talk about sea turtles, but also I don't think I've had somebody on the podcast that is in charge of an organization that does almost everything around sea turtles: rehabilitation, research, education, and then also you just manage all of that as it goes along. So and there's really some special things about the Marine Life Center that I wanted to chat about. So I'm really, really excited about that. before we get to all that exciting stuff, and we're going to start off with the great stuff. Andy, why don't you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Andy Dehart. I am the president and CEO of one of the most amazing places to work in the world, and that's Loggerhead Marine Life Center in Juno Beach, Florida, which is located just south of Jupiter, Florida, and just north of West Palm Beach. For those that aren't familiar with the state of Florida, Juno Beach is a nice little tiny beach town in our amazing atmosphere here in Palm Beach County.
That's awesome. I love it, man. It's and I can't wait to get into it. I mean, Florida is such an interesting spot for science in general and for a lot of marine science in general with a lot of organizations that are there and so forth. So I can't wait to ask questions about that. But how did you get started in the whole marine biology sort of interest?
I'm one of those very lucky ones that knew from a very young age. My dad happened to be a Navy hard hat diver when
Okay.
he got out of high school. Joined the Navy as an enlistee, worked his way, realized that he didn't want to scrub the deck of ships, so he decided to scrub the underside of ships as a as a hard hat diver. But even prior to the Navy, my dad taught himself how to scuba dive. He ordered the first aqua lung through the mail, taught himself how to dive, and which is pretty unique in the fact that he grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. So there's not a lot of oceans around. So he went out to the lakes of Nebraska, learned how to dive with the walleye and crappie and all those freshwater fish. But
Yeah.
for some reason, and it really boils down to this love of seeing Jacques Cousteau's Silent World, reading the books, seeing the shows, was mesmerized by the underwater world. And so I think for him, after the Navy, he became an architect, went on to do urban planning, ended up working for NOAA's Marine Coastal Affairs program, where he was actually looking at how do you do smart growth in island countries. So he
Wow.
was traveling a lot to the Keys, tropical Indo-Pacific. He held hearings in Guam, American Samoa, was holding some of the early hearings to look at setting up the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. So I was exposed to the water. I was snorkeling at the age of 4, and I saw my first shark, which was a Caribbean reef shark about 6 feet long, while snorkeling with my dad at age 5. And I knew right then and there I wanted to work with sharks for a living and be a marine biologist.
It's really interesting how your dad was a part of a lot of like some major conservation initiatives. And as a boy, did you have like an understanding of what he was doing by going to a lot of these small island like territories in the U.S. and working with like more of, I guess, was more on the governance aspect? Was that it?
Yeah, he was the one really holding some of these hearings about setting up these first MPAs within the federal system. I actually didn't really have any idea what he was doing other than
Mm.
he took me snorkeling, so I liked it. We went to the old Key West Aquarium back in the day, and when it really came full circle, about 15 to 20 years ago, I got to go back to American Samoa, or I got to go to American Samoa for the first time to
Nice.
do some of the initial fish diversity and biodiversity and density surveys in Fangatelli Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So to know and to go back there, 25, 30 years after my dad did those hearings, to see a national marine sanctuary that was set up and had been established and was this treasured place, for me was an amazing full circle moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's a pretty cool thing. Now your diving really pushed you through school and pushed you through like for that marine biology, and you have had quite a career in diving and just doing field work and so forth. Um, so after you did that work with I believe it was Noah, what was next in your career?
So for me, obviously that's when I got started snorkeling. I learned how to scuba dive at 15 because that was as early as you could.
Yeah,
At the day I was lucky enough that I had a high school biology teacher that was really in tune to my interests.
nice.
And she was a volunteer at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And she knew that there was a high school student summer program. So you started in this program, you went through about 2 months of training all day on Saturday. And then come summertime, you were employed in a 20-hour a week volunteer docent position. And then the other 20 hours of your 40-hour work week were occupied in a paid capacity. So
Oh,
either
cool.
in the gift store or selling memberships. And I ended up working in the admissions department selling tickets. And just that was my first gateway into work in public aquariums, and I really
Hmm.
love that blend of being around the animals every day, learning from the animals, but the educational component of also being that interface between the animals that don't have a voice and being their voice on the dry side of that aquarium exhibit and habitat, and being able to tell their stories to guests that were coming through. And in inner city Baltimore, there's a lot of kids and a lot of adults that never have the chance to see the
Yeah.
ocean. So I love that aspect of it.
And it's really interesting when you mentioned that, one half was on the dry side, working in like the where you were. Sorry, you said you were working in sort of like not only the education aspect, but you're working in like the gift shop and stuff like that.
I was doing ticket sales, so I
Ticket
was in
sales,
the
yeah,
guest services department selling tickets.
right.
I had to wear the puffin costume one day. Hey, whatever, what it's like being a marine biologist, whatever it takes.
Absolutely. Well, I find that interesting too because I was the host of the podcast for the Toronto Zoo for a couple of years, and one of the things that I noticed is a lot of the zookeepers that work at the zoo present day today, and they've been working there for 25 years and even more than that in some cases. They got their start, working as a seasonal person in the gift shop or at ticket sales, or on the dry side, not working with the animals, but with having that sort of goal of always wanting to be a zookeeper or always want to be a curator, whatever that might be. But I find like a lot of the generation today, they're not necessarily, they don't see that they don't see that relationship, where you can start from literally, I wouldn't even say starting from the bottom, but starting from a field outside of the field that you want. You're so close to it, but you're not quite there yet. But putting in the time and building those relationships to be able to work there potentially in the future. And was that how you ended up working at the Baltimore Aquarium? Was just through those
Yeah,
relationship and like through them knowing and seeing how you grew throughout high school?
yeah, it was. So I started working there when I was 15. In order to engage in the animal team, you had to be 18 years old. You had to
Gotcha.
be in college on a biology track. So as soon as I completed my freshman year of college, I came back to home, which was Annapolis, Maryland. Baltimore's right up the street. So I applied for my first animal internship at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And I think because I stood out as someone who had already applied themselves, um, in the meantime, I was also working at a aquarium pet store. You kind of, that's
Yeah,
what I
we've all
do.
done
I
that.
agree with you is that, that's, I think, one of the things that's is this getting, not every opportunity is the same. Certainly, working at an aquarium selling tickets is probably not the most amount of money you could make in a summertime job. You probably make a lot more as a waiter or waitress at a restaurant, which most of my friends did, or lawn care. But I knew that this was a gateway, and I knew this was the career I wanted to move into. So we are seeing less of that, where people are willing to start at the entry level and move up. But it absolutely helped me, and
Hmm.
taking every opportunity. So I did 3 years worth of internships in college in the animal care department, and that ultimately got me ready for my first full time job. I started college at Eckerd College in St. Pete, Florida, which is an amazing marine science school.
Yeah.
Um, I took a semester off between my junior and senior year of college because I was having a problem with organic chemistry. I was not,
Who
you
didn't?
know,
Who
I
didn't?
think there's a lesson here later in the show that's kind of perseverance, and if you don't have the straight A average,
Yep.
how to get by. You know, I was a mediocre student at best, and I'll admit that. But I was having a hard time with organic chemistry. I took a semester off to take it at my local community college, and oddly enough, I got a call from the executive director of Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo in Omaha, Nebraska, and they said I had been out there visiting some family, and I'd met with the director, told them all my experience being an intern, and they called me and said, we want you to come out and apply for a job to help us build and open the Kingdom of the Seas Aquarium at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo, which every year
What?
is rated by USA Today as one of the best zoos in the world.
Yeah.
And I would not. There's no way in that competitive aquarium market without that experience. There's no way I would have had that experience if I hadn't just gutted it out, sold tickets, wore the puffin suit, did every animal internship I could, work at pet stores. That's what got me in.
That's amazing. When and how did you end up meeting that director when you went out there? Was that just through connections?
Yeah, through connections. My grandfather was in the Rotary with him, and he knew I loved. My grandfather knew I loved aquariums because I'd been working in them for 4 years at that point in time, and really was just they got me hooked up with a behind the scenes tour. And I was talking to the curator at the time, and one of the things I think that was unique was, it was this was right around 94, 95, where there was a huge explosion of aquariums. So in that time period, Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo opened, Ripley's Aquarium opened their first aquarium in Myrtle Beach. So there was a real boom of aquariums, and there was not as much, certainly people that wanted to go to Omaha, Nebraska to be a marine biologist. Everybody thinks you're crazy. So, I had a leg up because I had had exposure to working with big sharks. That was my
Of
interest,
course.
and I had a lot of experience with that being an intern in Baltimore.
That's amazing. What an opportunity. Like, especially as a, young guy graduating, and then you get this opportunity. That's pretty unique. But again, shows that putting in the work at the beginning, and then, having that opportunity come hit you in the face, just being like, this is great, showing your passion to other people. Yeah, I just think that's awesome. I think also too, as marine biologists, it's part of our identity. When you start to fall in love
Mhm.
with the ocean, you start to talk about it a lot to other people, and that's a bit contagious. So when people know you're in love with somebody, I know people who've always tried to get me jobs or always tried to introduce me to other people that know marine biology, and obviously we get along always great when you talk to another marine biologist, and the research that they do. I think that's awesome. So that's great. What a story.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think my I think my parents thought I was crazy. Obviously my dad did everything he could to get out of Nebraska, and I'm saying I want to go back to Nebraska. So I think my parents thought I was crazy. Working at a zoo doesn't pay a lot of money, so I think they were worried. Am I going to
of
finish my
course.
college degree?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I was on the 9-year college program. I persevered, and ended up moving back to Baltimore and finishing school, and transferring credits back to the University of Nebraska. So
Good for you.
it's been an amazing ride, but a lot of that is it's just you have to have that sense of adventure a little bit, and,
Yeah.
and willingness to take a little risk. And I would say that an aquarium in the middle of the country, without graduating college, was a bit of a risk. But now, after opening the aquarium in Omaha, I said I'll never do another opening as long as I live, because it
Oh,
was 100-hour
interesting.
weeks for, yeah,
Yeah.
it was long, about 80-hour weeks for 4 months. But
Yeah.
then somehow I've opened 3 aquariums in my career, so I'm not sure why I didn't listen the first time.
You seem to become a specialist at that now too. You're probably sought after for opening aquariums at this point. I don't know if you'd still want to do that, but I'm sure that's the case. And yeah, and that's of course that's how we met. But you went back after working in Omaha. Um, you went back to the national, like the Baltimore National Aquarium, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I went back as a senior aquarist, left Omaha as an aquarist, went back to Baltimore as senior aquarist, and then in my time at the National Aquarium, I focused predominantly on their collecting programs and their shark tagging work, and then also I managed their off-campus quarantine facility.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for quite a while, was part of a few exhibit renovations, and then in about 2004, 2005, we were approached to merge with the oldest aquarium in the United States that was actually opened in 1932 in the Department of Commerce, which was the National Aquarium in Washington, D.C., which up until 2004, 2005 was a separate nonprofit from us.
Right.
At the time, it was the oldest aquarium, and it certainly looked like it. It was very long in the tooth, in the basement of the Commerce Building in downtown DC, a block from the White House. And I was brought down as a part of a team to say, hey, is this something we want to do? I said we should probably run for the hills, and we decided not to. But ultimately, we took it over, and then actually Noah helped us do an extreme makeover of that facility, which I kind of managed the work there for about 7 years, and then towards the end of my run at the National Aquarium, I was actually brought back in a dual role capacity to be the director of fishes and aquatic invertebrates for both the aquarium team in Baltimore and the aquarium team in DC.
Another wonderful opportunity. Of course, you grew up around there, so it's almost like home, which is wonderful. And that really got. I mean, just with the experience in Omaha, the experience in Baltimore, and then you moved up to Toronto. Quite a big move. Another. Would you call that another risk that you took in your career to move up to Toronto? Did you find that a risk? I mean, you have a family at that point. You're moving to Canada. Although we're not that different. It's still different policies and everything like that. That, very different, probably, especially opening an aquarium. Different rules, and of course the border, bringing animals over and stuff like that must have been interesting to deal with. Brand new aquarium, opening another aquarium. Could you just kind of give us a perspective of what led you to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting for for part of my time at the aquarium in DC and Baltimore. I worked for Discovery Shark Week as kind of their one of their content people. I had probably the coolest business card I've ever seen. That's a shark advisor for the Discovery Channel.
That's amazing.
You know, that's just a crazy, just lucky right place, right time. But that kind of was wrapping up. I think I felt like I'd done as much as I could. We were just in the process of finishing up a big exhibit renovation in Baltimore, and it was time to try something new. Ripley's Entertainment, which obviously runs, believe it or not, Meter Mazes. They're actually a Canadian-owned company,
Hmm.
and Toronto was going to be their flagship aquarium. They have two other aquariums, one in Myrtle Beach and one in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and that their team was an amazing animal team. Their VP of animal husbandry. Husbandry is an old farming term. It's we don't find husbands for animals. It's basically an old agriculture term for care and maintenance of animals. But
Right.
their VP had a world renowned reputation for doing things the right way and doing things with just the utmost respect for the animals. And this was going to be an amazing project, and to this day, I think is one of the best aquariums in the world. I'm pretty partial, but
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best aquariums in the world. And so I saw the designs and realized, yeah, I was up for another adventure. It had been long enough for me to forget how miserable doing an aquarium opening was. And so yeah, in the middle of, I think my assignment started. We had an offsite quarantine facility in Buffalo, New York.
Yep.
My first day was in a October snowstorm in Buffalo. Bought my house in Burlington, where I met you. Obviously,
Yep.
we have a close personal friend in the neighborhood, and
Yep.
absolutely love my Canadian experience. But yeah, I think it wasn't necessarily a risk. They were a firmly grounded, well-run organization with two very successful aquariums. I don't think I realized how successful the aquarium in Toronto was going to be, but
Mm.
logistically it was hard, and I think if I were to advise young people growing up and getting into the work world, I would say try an international move. If you've got the capabilities before you're rooted down, learn how a different culture does things. Because even just, hey, where we buy supplies for an aquarium was very different in Canada than it was in the U.S.
Right.
You have different vendors, and so I think it was a pretty cool experience. And then same thing, an aquarium project. It was 4 months of grueling hours. We did cross-border animal transports for 4 months straight. It was nightmarish process, but the end result was amazing.
Well, and I have to tell you, as someone who grew up in Toronto, as somebody who wanted, I was the same as you. As soon as I think I hit age 12, 13, 14, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Now, growing up in Toronto, Ontario, as a marine biologist, and being a marine biologist in Ontario is not an easy thing to do. But I've always, that was the dream, was Toronto needs aquarium. Toronto needed aquarium. And we always heard rumors for, at that point, I guess it was like 20 some odd years of my life, where I was just like, it's coming. It's coming. I remember talking to people at the CNE, the exhibition
Right.
place, and being like, oh no, we're thinking of having it here. I actually had discussions with them. And because I was like, I want to help and bring an aquarium in. So every time they announced an aquarium, I was like, no, they're not, and it's not happening. Like, there's no way it's happening. I'm not going to get my hopes up. And then finally, like the announcement was made, and it was like, no, this is legitimate. Like, Ripley's is coming. And I remember I went to the Ripley's Aquarium in Myrtle Beach, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic, the layout and everything, the conservation programs and so forth. So I was like, this is amazing. And then what happens? Our mutual friend Phil, and you're living in the same town, and I'm like, this is amazing, another marine biologist in the same town, this is awesome. And then I find out you like the 49ers. I'm like, okay, we're gonna
Yeah,
be best friends. This
absolutely.
is this is gonna be great. And then it, like, I there was a lot of pressure on you and your staff, as well as others that were in the process of opening this, to open this. I mean, the country was watching, essentially. How was that pressure Because I know there's, there's every time there's construction, there's always delays, and then people want to open right away, and then it doesn't. How was that dealing with that pressure from a logistical standpoint, but also trying as the person in charge of husbandry of the animals to make sure that the care is balanced, and it's up to like the beyond the standards. How was that dealing with that?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you get to the end of a construction project, you can't put the animals in before the aquariums are built or the
Hmm.
windows in. So ultimately, the way these play out is it is the animal team that comes in last.
Gotcha.
And it's our responsibility to do things safely and in the best interest of the animals while still dealing with a construction project that I've never been a part of one that doesn't run over in time or cost.
Of course.
So you're the one left at the end of the project saying, hey, we're losing money every day we're not open. What I loved about that project, because there's this well entrenched um, quality of care that's built into their ecosystem, is we do things right. We do things right every time. So I think there was never this, okay, well, you can skip this step, right? Like,
Mm.
so what happens in big aquariums is the same thing that happens in home aquariums. You have to cycle them. And every new aquarium, you can either use bottled bacteria or you use a few little starter fish that are really hardy. And that fish waste or that bacteria has a three-step process where ammonia is consumed by one type of bacteria. There's a second type of bacteria that grows that takes up the ammonia that's converted to nitrite. And then there's a third bacteria that converts nitrite to nitrate,
Hmm.
which is the least toxic form of pollutant that's generated by fish waste. So this is a process that no matter what you do, you're not going to speed it up. And
Hmm.
it actually happens a lot slower in cold water. So, as you might imagine, the Ripley's Aquarium of Canada has an amazing cold water gallery. It's the Canadian Waters Gallery,
Yeah.
and that there's Great Lakes exhibit. There's a giant kelp forest exhibit. So, what was actually really refreshing was there was not this push to say, "Hey, we're losing money every day." It was, "Okay, we're going to do this the right way,
Hmm.
even if we open late." I don't think people fully understand the infrastructure that goes into moving animals from Buffalo to Toronto, or even greater from Gallenberg or Myrtle Beach to Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, these are full-fledged semi 4,000-gallon aquariums on a semi truck doing a cross-border transport, which isn't cheap.
No.
This is not, this is about doing things the right way and doing
Yeah.
the right way every time. Having a quarantine program that you don't want to skimp on, typically fish quarantine. You do a prophylactic treatment of typically copper sulfate, which actually removes external parasites, and then you have a series of medicated gels to remove internal parasites. So again, those are areas where you can't cut corners,
Yeah.
and there's pressure to open, but I never felt it because there was a corporate philosophy of doing things the right way. And I think you wonder when you're in delirium and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you just finished a transport, you got to rinse the truck and be ready for the next day. But that opening day, when you see people experience that tunnel or a schooling fish aquarium or even little Amazonian archerfish spitting at flies on a stick, these are the things that, like you said, growing up in Canada, you're not exposed to every day. Um, when you get to see those kids' faces or
Oh,
even the adults' faces, that first day is well worth it.
like you said, I agree. It's one of the best aquariums that I've been to. I love going there. I still go there at least once, twice, three times a year. Sometimes on my birthday, I've been there. It's a lot of fun. It's relaxing. I love the layout. I love the way it was designed, and then obviously the exhibits are fantastic. Um, After that, you stayed there for about 4 or 5 years, and then you moved down to Miami. You left the cold weather of Canada, and you're like, I'm gonna go down to South Florida and enjoy the warm weather, but also with
Yeah.
another new open. So is it 4 to 5 years that gives you that forgetfulness of opening up a new aquarium, and then you had a chance to open up the I forget the name is Frost Museum, right? What's the full name? I apologize.
Yes, the Philip and Patricia Frost Museum of Science in
Yes.
downtown Miami.
Yeah, and that was almost like a bigger one, right?
Yeah, so it was interesting, right? So I, it may have felt like 4 or 5 years. I think I was only in Toronto for 3 years, but I
Oh,
met
okay.
met lifelong friends, in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, including yourself, and it's Toronto's an amazing place. And despite what you think, I didn't leave. Canada because of the cold,
Yeah.
or the fact that I could go diving in Florida every day I wanted to. But you know, Canada's a really expensive place to live.
Hmm.
If you live in Canada, I'm preaching to the choir. So,
Hmm.
but this again, I think as I opened on opening day of Toronto, I think I said I need to tattoo on my back. Do not do another opening. Apparently, I didn't do that, obviously. So it was the middle of February, and the CEO of Frost Science had come up, mainly to see what we had done, to get kind of a feel for a new aquarium project, what was capable, what was it like hiring staff. Hiring staff was very unique. You know, I think that is, as as there are budding marine scientists, aquarium work is a great way to get started. You're going to learn a lot about a lot of different taxa of animals.
Hmm.
You're going to learn how to do treatments. You're going to learn how to do fish taxonomy. You're going to learn how to do animal care. Um, these are all valuable skill sets, whether you stay in the marine science field in the aquarium world or you use it as a platform for other parts. So having that aquarium in Toronto now is really helping that hire mostly Canadians. We had a mix of about 50% Canadians, 50% Americans that had
Right.
aquarium experience. Um, so I think for me, you know, despite saying I'm never going to do this again, it was middle of February. They came up and wanted to see the aquarium, and then they were like, "We want to go to lunch." And of course, you kind of have a suspicion what's going to happen there. And so they made the ask, and I said, "No, I'm not interested in doing another opening. I'm sorry. I can give you some advice, but I'm not interested in another opening." Um, but at the time, I was on the board of directors for the Reef and Brownell Education Foundation, which is based in Key Largo. They do fish surveys on abundance and diversity. It's the largest fish database in the world. And I was coming down to a board meeting in Key Largo, and I told the CEO of Frost Science that I would stop by and see the construction site.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that I think was my undoing. You know, it's right at the base of Government Cut. You look straight out Government Cut where all the cruise ships are,
Hmm.
and you can see the Gulf Stream. And they were trying to do some pretty novel things. Our biggest exhibit at Frost Science was a 500,000 gallon martini glass that we were doing pelagic animals. So scalloped hammerheads, Mobula devil rays, mahi mahi, some pretty cool stuff that had not
Yeah.
been done all that many times in the aquarium industry. And it was, for me, I think the real hook was it was a chance to build a conservation program from the ground up. So although they grew out of the old Miami Science Museum in
Hmm.
Coconut Grove, they did not have any standing marine science conservation programs. So this was a chance to move up to the vice president role and really create a conservation platform. Um, and ultimately, we kind of picked three things, and that was invasive and exotic species. So we actually started a early detection rapid response program. Everybody's pretty familiar with lionfish as this nasty
Yeah.
invasive species that lives in the oceans. But there's about 47 other non-native fish species that have been found in Florida waters from predominantly pet aquarium
Oh,
fish that
wow.
have been released. So we had a program where within 48 hours of a reporting, we'd have a team in the water to remove those with about a 90% success rate
Wow.
and put them live, not speared, in an aquarium that actually helped with that conservation effort. We also did habitat restoration through mangroves, sea oats, and also coral restoration. So we did a 100 acre, or sorry, 100 yard coral reef restoration effort between the Super Bowl, unfortunately, that the 49ers lost in Miami.
Oh,
Not a
poor
fun day
Not a
as a
fun
49ers
day.
fan.
We had it too. We had it.
So
So close.
yeah, we did. We had it. But so that was a partnership between Frost Science, University of Miami, and this amazing veterans group called Force Blue.
Oh
And
yeah, I know
maybe
Force Blue. Yeah.
we'll come back to Force Blue after this. But then, you know, being able to do those type of programs, and then we did kind of a special program that we called Treasured Taxa, and that was our window to do programs on like sawfish or spotted eagle rays that really focused on one species. So to me, ultimately, although I said I'd never do another aquarium opening, it was that combination of trying novel and new things that hadn't been done in the aquarium
Hmm.
industry, and the conservation really hooked me.
And we've had, when you lived up here, we had a number of discussions on conservation. Obviously, both of us are interested in conservation. That's why one of the reasons why you get into marine biology, you fall in love with the animals, and then all of a sudden, how do you protect them? Especially you with sharks. And so it's in, that conservation has always been in your blood, and so it must have been quite, you must have been quite excited to be able to build this program, especially such novel ones. I love the invasive species where it's like people know about lionfish, but all the other species, like you mentioned, there's 40 plus species that are in those waters from the pet industry, but we don't realize it. Taking them, not just killing them, but taking them and putting them in an aquarium, and offering that as an educational piece to say, hey, if these fish are here too, or these animals are here too, and this is a great way to bring about awareness and raise awareness. I love that type of programming. It's innovative. It works well, and it's something that's needed. So congratulations on coming up with those programs, and building those programs. You must have had. It sounds like a lot. A lot of programs coming out. You must have had quite the number of staff. Was it a lot of? I mean, there are a lot of schools, in that have a marine biology program within the sort of the southern Florida area. Were a lot of the people hired from those schools, or are they all over the country?
There's a little bit of a mix. I mean, South Florida certainly is a treasure trove for marine science
For
schools. You've
sure.
got University of Miami, which is an incredible program. Nova is another one.
Hmm.
FIU has an incredible program.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we were certainly blessed with a lot of great programs. Part of it was actually integrating the conservation efforts into the husbandry team. So conservation actually lived as part of the husbandry team. We had a curator of conservation, we had a curator of ecology, that really led those programs. But the people that participated were also the aquarist and husbandry staff, because ultimately those are the things that are career enrichment for
Hmm.
those folks.
Oh
Working
yeah.
as a aquarist, working as a zookeeper is incredibly hard work. I don't
Mhm.
think people understand what goes into those professions. It's incredibly hard. You have long hours. It's the end of a day, and an animal doesn't look well, or something's going to happen, and you know something's sick. You stay late. You put in yeoman's hours to make sure that animal care is number one priority, and it is not a high paying job. I don't know of a single husbandry staff, whether it be zookeeper or aquarist, that drives in a BMW,
Yeah.
or can afford an apartment on their own. I mean, this is a labor of love.
Right.
So I think for me, it was a way that, okay, I can be involved in conservation. I don't have to just clean the exhibits with a toothbrush. I can do that in the morning, and then by the afternoon, I'm out helping plant sea oats or removing, non-native vegetation for mangroves. We had some amazing partnerships. One of them was with Force Blue. Um, for me, that was really full circle with my dad being a Navy
Yeah.
hard hat diver. Force Blue employs military special forces divers. So these are anybody, veteran, men or women, that have gone through the special forces, and our U.S. government has literally poured millions of dollars into making sure they're trained divers and really proficient.
Hmm.
These folks are used to working in unbelievable conditions, long hours. But oddly enough, that they've never seen the coral reef. They're diving at night. They're doing a bomb payload at night with a kickboard with a compass and a gauge on it. They've spent more hours in the ocean than I have, but they haven't seen.
Right.
So one of my favorite stories is, we had one of our first coral restoration dives with Force Blue. One of my good friends on the team, Gonzo, was a retired Navy SEAL. Again, he had been in blackwater diving, and just to see him light up when we were doing this restoration work, he's gone from demolition to restoration,
Yeah.
and in that flip of a switch, you think about the hours and the decades that he's put in the war. I mean, we've had millions of war efforts in the last 2 decades,
Hmm.
and probably some of the things that he's seen in that time. This was actually a healing process for them, and that's actually part of Force Blue's mandate, is to get these guys and gals involved in marine conservation. Number one, so they can be active participants, but secondarily, there's a healing process that happens for them. So for me, growing up, I mean, the Navy SEALs were as close as it got to Superman and Batman.
Yeah.
I mean, those were my superheroes.
Yeah.
So here I am as an aquarium person and getting to share bubbles with a bunch of Navy SEALs, Air Force PJs, Green Berets. I mean, I'm diving with my superheroes, and they're excited about. Oh my gosh, you got to feed a 16-foot tiger shark? You're crazy. I wouldn't do that. I'm like, well, I wouldn't do half of what you're doing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I think there's what was interesting is I think there was this shared bond of mutual respect and hard work that that I don't think was an expected consequence, but certainly wasn't a consequence nonetheless. Is when they're like, "Wow, this is really hard work, and you guys are doing this for passion," which if you're part of the special forces, it's passion. You have a higher calling.
Yeah.
So I think for me, those partnerships, I've come to be one of my good friends, Mac Hollins, he was a Miami Dolphin at the time. He's now an Atlanta Falcon
Okay.
wide receiver. He's been out, getting him involved in those programs. He got to dive in the big martini glass at Frost Science,
Nice.
and he's actually been out removing non-native fish from Blue Heron Bridge, which is one of the best dive spots in South Florida. So it's fun to get these aquarium staff members involved in those projects and see a bigger outlet in life. And we worked not only with Force Blue, but we worked with University of Miami and
Yeah.
Nova staff. We worked with Project Secor, which has a Miami office. So getting them exposed, and what I found was that collaboration. So many of us don't do a good job of it. Everybody fights for their piece of donor turf or grant money. When we collaborated, it was so strong.
I remember having Force Blue on the podcast a number of years ago, early on in the podcast, and like, let's be honest, it saves lives. For a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these people who are coming out from some pretty hairy situations and quite the career, and so it's great to see that not only the program is still around but doing well and flourishing and being able to give that sense of purpose. The stuff that we enjoy all the time, and seeing that enjoyment on their faces is fantastic. And if obviously they have the more skill sets than we probably ever will in terms of diving.
Absolutely. I
And
mean, they're tireless, right? I mean, they're
oh yeah.
doing. I'm freezing cold, and they're doing it in a speedo. I'm like, you guys are tough.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, it's such a great opportunity to get involved in conservation programs. Now, for the next little bit, we're going to be talking about the Marine Life Center that you have come across and you started here. What made you do that move? Was it the opportunity to do more conservation?
Yes, I mean, obviously, I've had an amazing ride in this amazing industry. Um, I think Loggerhead Marine Life Center is this. It's a 40-year-old organization. It started by this amazing woman named Eleanor Fletcher. She was one of the first civilians to get a turtle rehab and research permit. She was actually one of the first females to do the same. So
Wow.
she was this really amazing woman here, icon in the community that started what was then the Juno Beach Children's Museum, pulling these little hatchlings off the beach, getting them healed up, and so I think so that actually started 40 years ago. It's our 40-year anniversary this year. So there's an amazing legacy of work here at Loggerhead Marine Life Center. The staff um, is truly amazing, dedicated staff that have been here. A lot of them have been here 17, 15, 20 years. So for me, they did a couple different expansions. They there was initially it was a couple trailers and some Walmart kiddie pools. Back in Eleanor's day, that graduated to a bigger campus, a bit more robust with 11 sea turtle hospital tanks, and then about right at the beginning of COVID, they started a big expansion program here that essentially doubled the size of campus, added in some aquarium habitats, some indoor exhibit space. There's like a young learning area, learning lagoon, and then there's like a digital projection wall where kids can go on a screen and learn about counter shading and coloration and camouflage. They make their own reef animal and then they send it to a giant screen. So we really
Cool.
expanded the capabilities of campus, but retained our ability to be a leading sea turtle rehabilitation hospital with cutting edge sea turtle research. So I think I've known the reputation of this place for a long time. They were going through a change in leadership. I saw this as a chance. One of the things that's really struck me in my career, probably since I did that tour in the aquarium in DC, where we took this old aquarium, changed, remodeled it, but also rebuilt the culture. I realize the culture is absolutely everything, and you
Mm.
can have the best job working with sharks, and you're out there diving with sharks every day. But if the culture around it is not fun, this is a job that I said is a labor of love. So the culture in that organization needs to be one where you love to come to work because you're not getting a king's ransom to do it. And so being able to come in as the CEO and president was a chance to rebuild a culture of an organization that was going through leadership change. We had some turnover at the leadership level, and ultimately that's while a shark fanatic at my core, I love everything that swims in the ocean. So sea turtles are an amazing part of that ecosystem. They're sentinels for the ocean. And our mission is to talk about ocean conservation through the lens of sea turtles. So it's about ocean ecosystems. We're just using the sea turtle as that beacon, as that voice to talk about all the issues going on in the ocean.
Unreal. I mean, that is it's a great history you gave us, but it's also that's not an easy thing to do a rehab center, education center, cutting edge research. You obviously have, I was looking on the website before we did this, and I'm looking at the staff, and although it's a fairly large staff, it's still not that big to get all that done. Having staff there for 15, 20 years is almost unheard of now in the marine conservation world, right? To be able to hold positions that way, you must have a pretty special staff to be able to do all that work. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the staff and like the passion that they have and sort of the drive that they have to continue to do so much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so our four key pillars are rehabilitation, research, conservation, and education. So those are the four things we really focus on, while also being an attraction that's open to the public. So one of the things that's really exciting and special about Loggerhead Marine Life Center is there's no fee to come in.
Love
We
that.
do rely 100% on donations. We don't get a ton of government funding, but we do rely on donations, but we don't charge an entry fee. And one of the ways that we offset that is we have probably the best gift store retail operation in Palm Beach County, if not South Florida. I'm a little proud of that program, but we do about 3 million and we do about 3 million in revenue in our gift store that really helps
Wow.
the sea turtles. We also have an amazing event space where everything that we do, whether it be selling events, whether it be at the retail selling turtle t-shirts, all goes back to this program of research, rehabilitation, conservation, education. So, you know, some of the teams that kind of have gone through that leadership transition. We have a VP of education that's really focused on Title I school education. Clearly, we have got an amazing public school system here.
Mhm.
West Palm Beach and Junos are very affluent communities, but we have marginalized communities very close. And although our beach is a free access beach, it's amazing how many kids have never seen the ocean, or never experienced sand between their toes, or
Yeah.
certainly have never seen a sea turtle. So we really focus on that Title I school giving. We're actually part of after school programs where we actually go into the school community. We not for school day activities, but in school after school activities. We have a lot of grant funded scholarships to attend our summer camps, which also include meals because meals are a huge thing.
Mhm.
These kids need that meal that they would receive at school, and so we've been really successful that way. And
Awesome.
then, so we've been able to fund that. So that's our education department.
Now, I think that's amazing, and to be able to have all of these sort of benefits to people who come to the center. Um, you must have you must have a great relationship with the donors. Can you talk a little bit? A lot of people who run nonprofit organizations, some people struggle finding money and grants and so forth, especially these days. It's very difficult. It's very competitive. There's a lot of money. There's not a lot of money to go around for the amount of stuff that needs to be done. Can you talk about how the Marine Life Center continues to build those relationships with foundations and donors?
Yeah, so I always tackled one of our columns. The other two, that are critically important from a fundraising standpoint are research and rehabilitation. So
Yeah,
we monitor 9.5 miles of beach in Juno Beach. This year we had a record year nesting
really.
of ever. We are right today at 24,799 nests. We look to
Whoa.
probably, hopefully, potentially breaks 25,000 nests, and that's composed of uh, leatherbacks, greens, and loggerheads. Loggerheads being the most prevalent. We had over 15,000 loggerhead nests this year. So that's what our research team focuses on. They're out every morning, every evening. We've satellite tagged leatherbacks. We look at nesting surveys. How successful is each nesting? What's the hatch rate? What's the survivability? Are turtles coming back? So that's what our research team does. And then our rehab team takes in roughly about 100 sea turtles every year, with the goal of rehabilitating and releasing them. And that depends on the injury as to how successful we are at that. We take in about 1,000 hatchlings every year. And then we also we're going through a strategic master plan right now, but our conservation efforts to date have really focused on marine debris. So we have a weekly beach cleanup. Our beach is probably one of the most clean beaches in South Florida because we're out there every week. We actually manage the trash, we sort it, we sort by type, we get measurements so that we actually put some empirical data around it. But the scary thing is that even though we're out there every week, we still find new trash every week. So we really rely on those core four programs to help our fundraising. And luckily, we're well known in this community, and we have a really generous support system around us with amazing donors from all walks of life, bankers, real estate developers. We've got an amazing board
Mhm.
of directors that support the system 100%. Every one of our board members is a donor. So we're blessed with being in a great environment. We have a great team that works internally.
The four pillars and being so effective at that is amazing. And to be able to see that success, can you give some bit, like you talked about the 24,000 nests, over 24,000 nests, and 15,000 for loggerheads? What are the average numbers that you've seen in the past, just to give kind of people a perspective of how good these numbers are?
Well, I mean, our second best year was last year, with 22,000 nests. So I mean, but that's a ginormous jump by
Right.
3,000 nests. So again, it's one of those things where I hear, unfortunately, oh, well, global warming must be good for turtles. That's not the case.
Yeah.
We got to spell that out really clearly. One of the things at risk here with global warming is sea turtles. Their gender is determined by nest temperature. So we say hot chicks, cool dudes. The boys develop at the bottom of the nest because there's cooler nest temperatures, and the females develop at the top of the nest. So we want that in balance. There's always more females, but as global warming happens, or even something as different as the color of the sand, if it's novel sand from the beach or if it's dredge sand, that can affect that nest temperature in really hot years like we've had this year. Um, what we're actually probably seeing this high nesting success with is based on the fact that roughly 38, 40 years ago, we federally protected sea turtles.
Mhm.
You could no longer hunt them for food. We protected them. We started looking at TED devices for turtle excluding devices in commercial fishing gear. And what we know is that most species of sea turtles need at least 30 years to reach maturity. So, ding, 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 you do the math. We protected sea turtles 40, 38, 40 years ago. We're
Starting to see
now
that.
starting to see the fruits of those labors. So, as people are making these fisheries and animal management decisions, it's important to understand that you can't just turn off the fire hydrant of things like Goliath grouper and then 2 years later say, oh, they're protected. They've had 2 years. Let's open it back up. You really need to look at population restocking.
No doubt. I think it's such a great conservation story to see the numbers increasing as we go along, and from 30 years ago when we saw that federally protected legislation go through. It's always great to see that conservation. We've seen it with great white sharks on the west and east coasts, and we're starting to see it elsewhere as well. See the sea lion population on the west coast and so forth. So it's great to be able to see these conservation stories. We don't talk about it enough. Obviously, we're not out of the woods in terms of things, but we know that
No.
policies work. We know that protection works. We know that research allows us to determine trends and which way they're going. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of the times when they hear the conservation success stories. So, but it's just amazing. Can you give us as we kind of come to a close? Can you give us sort of a I guess what you hope to get across in the next year in terms of from the Marine Life Center? Like, do you have any projects going on or things that you want to do in the next year?
Sure. I mean, for us, it's understanding our role. I think we're certainly nationally and internationally relevant and important in both the turtle research and rehabilitation work that we do. Most of the turtles that come in are from human impacts, and I would say number one is from boat strikes, and number two is from entanglement, fishing line, and fishing hooks. So those are both human impacts, and we have two conservation programs looking at that. One is a sea turtle speed zone or slow zone.
Hmm.
I think people get really wary about too much legislation, and I think we want to take a different approach of working with fishermen, working with boaters, because ultimately, if you're on a boat and you're a fisherman, you're already halfway there. You love the ocean the same way we do. It's just trying to how do we boat smart? And I
Hmm.
like the term turtle safe boating. So going out with polarized glasses on, being aware of your spatial awareness when it's nesting season. It's certainly in Juno Beach, Jupiter, maybe not legislated this no wake zone, like they've done with manatees. I think trying to get that grassroots buy-in
Hmm.
to what is in the environment, because oftentimes hunters, fishermen, boaters, recreationists, they're the ones that care as much. Um, we're not talking to a different soapbox. We're talking to the same soapbox. We're just educating.
Right.
Um, we have a responsible peer initiative that looks at, okay, what happens if there's an entanglement with a turtle or a pelican or a seagull? How do you do that? How do you manage that? How do you have the right equipment on board to be able to handle that and triage that situation? For us that's what we're kind of looking at in the conservation space. We're also looking at habitat restoration and rehabilitation with sand dunes. Do we get involved in
Oh,
seagrass
cool.
communities? Because clearly the green sea turtles are 100% dependent on that. What's happening with the coral reefs in Florida right now is tragic. So, how does that affect sea turtles? So we're trying to be smarter with who we partner with, and partner with more people, in maybe spaces that we haven't been in, but maybe we're not in the driver's seat. Maybe we're just participating as it pertains to sea turtles. We're looking at growing our reach, certainly in the Title One space. We are one of the big things that got me to this job was, really boils out of our my experience in Baltimore. When I started selling tickets, I had all my best friends were from inner city Baltimore. I had friends of every ethnicity, background. Some from poverty, some from upwardly mobile, some from wealthy families. But we were all in it together. We had a lot of fun. And what I found was as I left the ticket sales arena and got into the animal sciences, where you needed to have a college degree, where you needed to have free internships to be able to participate to move to the next level, there really was this segregation of who was able to move forward and who wasn't. And it was really the upper middle class and wealthy that were able to do the free internships. So as we look at how do we build programs here at Loggerhead, I want to build programs that, number one, we can interest the kids at age 4 and 5, like I was hooked, pun
Hmm.
intended. Get them excited about sea turtles,
Yeah.
and then have programs for them in middle school where maybe they're getting their hands wet, and maybe by high school they have a program like I did, but instead of being a volunteer docent, there's a paid position where they're actually on the turtle hospital floor being a brand ambassador for us in a paid position. And to me, pie in the sky is we have a dorm. We don't have a dorm currently, but pie in the sky is we have a dorm out back that we can bring college students that are learning how to be the next turtle veterinarian, maybe from one of the islands like Cuba or Puerto Rico or
Hmm.
an area that isn't incredibly wealthy, that we're that place where there's access to free educational material, free experiences that's subsidized by those folks that are wealthy in this community that want to see that access. Because if we keep talking to the same soapbox, if you're worried about how you're going to put a meal on the table, you really don't care about whether it came in plastic or glass. We really need to move the needle on our reach, And I think it's places like Loggerhead that have that free access that hopefully can move that needle a little bit. And that's a big part of why I'm here.
I think it's a really important model going forward to offer those programs so that people have an equal opportunity to get that, not only that, develop that passion from a young, as a young child, but also to continue that passion through high school, but also continue that opportunity. I think it's a great way to move forward. I think that's something that we definitely need more of, not only at the Marine Life Center, but elsewhere in this field. Because we have a lot of work to do. Let's be honest.
Right.
Um, uh,
We sure do. And
yeah,
time is ticking.
absolutely. One of the questions, speaking of that, and obviously, Florida's gone through a lot, and we've seen temperatures of 101 Fahrenheit, in the ocean, which is insane to think about. But a lot of the times I've covered stories before from South Florida where there have been strandings of sea turtles in the past where they've had cold swell. So they almost like freeze up and they can't
Mhm.
swim anymore. They come to shore. There's rehabilitation centers, I'm sure, like Marine Life Center, that kind of take a lot of them in, collaborate with others to take more in, and then eventually with the goal of re-releasing them back into the ocean. What are the implications, like direct implications to sea turtle health from hot water or warm water than cold water? Does it affect them in any way other than sort of the habitats like coral bleaching and so forth and algae?
Well, the primary effect is certainly habitat related, but
Mhm.
there is a threshold where turtles are pretty uncomfortable temperature wise. So, I think they're spending less time at the surface. I don't know that much research has been done on that, but I mean, we know just from running. Luckily, we have closed loop aquarium systems here, filtration systems. We're
Right.
not we're not water in, water out, so we're actually able to chill our turtle hospital tanks, which is an animal is already um, you know, the animal's already in bad condition. Their immune system's lowered. If we had these elevated water temperatures, the healing process would be really hard to deal with.
Mm,
Obviously, bacteria grows faster the hotter it is. So,
mhm.
I think it is a bit scary. I think it's a scarier endeavor on the habitat side than it is just a direct implication. But whether they're using different parts of the habitat. One of the things that's actually happened in the Keys is there's actually a warm water upwelling. So I think that will drive. We know that happens with other animals. Is water temperature drives migration, it drives feeding patterns, and that may certainly be a long term effect by heat warming oceans.
It's really, yeah, it's something that got me as I hear about these temperature increases, and hopefully we don't see that again, but unfortunately I think we will. And then sort of sea turtle health in general. So um, Andy, this has been such an honor to have you on the podcast. It's been so great to be able to talk to you about the Marine Life Center. I mean, I just love it. I'd love to invite you back on to talk more about some of the programs, dive deep into some of the research and whatnot, just so that people can get to know more about what's happening with sea turtles and some of the good news that's happening in the past, and some of the research of what we need to be aware of in the future. So I'd love to invite you or some of your staff back on to be able to discuss this on the podcast. It'd be really great. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing not only your career but also your current position right now at the Marine Life Center and all the stuff that's going on at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been great talking to you. It's been too long, so look
Absolutely.
forward to seeing you before too long.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Maybe we can go to the Super Bowl this year together and watch the 49ers win.
Maybe so.
Right on.
Fingers crossed. Right, it's
Fingers
early. The season
crossed.
hasn't started.
Exactly. Thanks. Thank you, Andy, for joining us here on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to be able to catch up with you as well as find out more about your career. Sometimes when we have friends that we get to see on a fairly regular basis, as I was able to do with Andy when he lived here in Burlington, you don't always get to know a lot of their career. And then when he left Burlington to go to Miami to do his work at the Philip and Patricia Frost Museum of Science, we lost touch a little bit just because different lives, living far apart, that kind of stuff. And so it was great to hear those updates of his career, and then of course now where he is right now at the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. And so I think it's great. And actually, I should mention too, the day I publish this, I'm actually, like the day you're going to listen to this or the day this goes live, I'm actually in the area of the Loggerhead Marine Life Center. I'm traveling to Florida to be able to go to an event for another foundation that is funded podcasts for me in the past, and we're going to celebrate their 20-year anniversary. But I'll be in the area, so hopefully Andy and I will be able to see each other in person if that's possible, and be able to see the Marine Life Center just in person. We'll see if that works. But I just find it's nice. I decided to publish it on the day that hopefully I'll be able to see him. And so it's great for you to hear this while I'm down there. And I think that's always fun. But, there's a lot of great things that come out of this. The different risks that Andy took, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, also sort of his passion for conservation. And that's what has always led him to the next job, and to be able to do different types of conservation, to be able to create programs that might not be traditional, in terms of looking at invasive species, and bringing them into collecting invasive species, bringing them into an aquarium so that people can see what these invasive species are, who they are, what they look like, and also what they do, and through the education program at the aquariums. And that's a powerful tool. That's a hugely powerful tool. And it's great to have people like Andy who have the innovation, working with people who also have the innovation to be able to do these types of programs and work with people and the public to be able to make them aware of what's going on. There's a lot of ways to make people aware. Podcasting is what I do. Andy does through these visual sort of displays at aquariums, and now at the Marine Life Center through rehabilitation, education, and research. And conservation, these are really important when we look at conservation. It's connecting with people, and Andy's always been able to do that through his work in film and production and documentaries, his work in aquariums, his work at the Marine Life Center. He's always been able to do that, and I love how that's always been sort of the underlining passion in his work. Doesn't matter the jobs. He's done a lot of very different jobs, but there's always been conservation at hand. And I think that's special. I think that's really important. It's a difficult thing to do, to be able to do that throughout your entire career. So congratulations to Andy, and I hope he's able to continue to do that, not only at the Marine Life Center, but wherever he's able to go in the future. And, he's always up to something, and I think it's great. And I'm looking forward to seeing the stuff ahead that comes up for that Marine Life Center. So anyways, if you have any questions or comments about this podcast and or any of the other shows that we put on, any of the other tongue twister, any of the other episodes that we put up, you can do so. You can contact me and ask them or comment them on my Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean, all one word. I would love to hear from you and have that conversation with you. And if you want to share this with somebody who is interested in the Marine Life Center or interested in marine biology, please do so. It's free. All you have to do is just copy the link and send that on your podcast app, and just send that episode to someone that you think will benefit from it. But thank you so much again for joining us today on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.